Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight. My name is Tanner Gardner, and I am the Chief Operating Officer in the Department of Athletics at Rice. And we are pleased to have you here tonight for our second ProfessionOWL panel. These panels are intended to highlight some of our successful letter winners and hear about their journey, both at Rice and since Rice. Tonight, we're really excited to have with us four very distinguished business professionals who are going to share a little bit about their journey from Rice as a student athlete to where they are today. Just one note of housekeeping, the last 10 minutes or so, we will take questions. So I encourage you to post questions in the Q&A function, and we will look through those at the end and hopefully get back to them. So without further ado, we'll get into introductions. Our first panelist is Jen Neal, who is the Chief Financial Officer at Targa Resources, a leading midstream energy company. Jen was a member of the Rice women's basketball team, where she started 32 games over her career. Her senior year team was particularly successful, going 21-9, which included defeat of the defending national champions, Notre Dame. After graduating from Rice with a BA in Economics, Policy Studies, and Managerial Studies, she's enjoyed a successful career in the financial services industry, working across private equity, asset management, and investment banking. She joined Targa in 2013 and has quickly risen from the Director of Finance to the CFO. In addition to her work, Jen serves on many Rice boards, or has, serving on the Association of Rice Alumni Board, the OWL Club Board, the Women's Athletic Advisory Board, and she currently serves on the board for the Council of Overseers at the Jones School of Business. So please join me in welcoming Jen Neal.
Thanks, Tanner.
Our second panelist is Kevin Rabbit, who's currently the CEO and board director at Hornblower Group, which is a global experience and transportation leader, particularly in the area of cruises. Kevin was a member of the Rice men's basketball team, where he served as a captain and was a member of one of the squads that earned a bid to the NIT, where they defeated one of the great teams that year, Wisconsin. After he graduated from Rice with a BA in Managerial Studies, and he held a series of positions across sports and entertainment, including as a college basketball coach, before he went to Harvard Business School and graduated. Kevin quickly rose to be the CEO of multiple companies, including Global Experience Specialists, 3-Day Blinds, where I think he crossed over with Glenn, and also the NEP Group, where he crossed over with Glenn, one of our other panelists. He's been the CEO at Hornblower since July. Outside of work, Kevin is involved in multiple nonprofit boards in the Houston area, including the Pittsburgh Children's Hospital Foundation and the Jerome Bettis Foundation. And he, as well, is an ardent supporter of Rice men's basketball. Please join us in welcoming Kevin Rabbit. Our third panelist tonight is Jeremy Thigpen, who is President and Chief Executive Officer of Transocean, which is the world's largest offshore driller. Jeremy was a member of the Rice football team, where he was a multi-year starter on the offensive line, and also earned all conference honors. Most notably, Jeremy was a part of the 1994 team who defeated the nationally ranked Texas Longhorns in what was a rare Sunday night football game on ESPN. It was there because of the strike in baseball. So a good time for them to highlight that. Jeremy graduated from Rice with a BA in Economics and Managerial Studies, and immediately started what would prove to be a very successful career at National Oilwell Varco. He served in various management and business development capacities, which ultimately culminated in him becoming the CFO. During this time, he also completed a program for management development at the Harvard Business School. He switched over to Transocean in 2015 and has been the CEO there ever since. In the community, Jeremy invests a lot of time in supporting the missions of both the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Houston and the Boys and Girls Country, where he served on the boards for both and also has chaired significant fundraising campaigns for the organization. Please join me in welcoming Jeremy Thigpen. And last but certainly not least, our final panelist is Glenn Youngkin, the recently retired co-CEO of the Carlyle Group, which is one of the world's largest and most successful investment firms. He was a member of the men's basketball team as well, and his senior year campaign included wins over multiple Southwest Conference foes, included Texas Tech, Baylor, TCU, and SMU. And that season would prove to set the stage for some very successful years of Rice basketball, which Kevin Rabbit enjoyed himself. After he graduated from Rice with a BS in mechanical engineering and a BA in managerial studies, Glenn held positions with a few prestigious professional services firms, including Credit Suisse First Boston and McKinsey and Company. And he also earned his MBA from the Harvard Business School. He joined the Carlyle Group in 1995 and had a very successful run, which culminated in being named the co-CEO in 2017, a position which he would hold until his retirement last July. Glenn is also deeply involved in the community, and we'll hear more about that a little bit later. And he recently launched the Virginia Ready Initiative, which is a nonprofit focused on retraining the unemployed of Virginia, which is obviously a very pressing topic right now. Please join me in welcoming Glenn Youngkin. All right, so with that, we will jump right into the questions. And Jeremy, we're going to go to you first. And maybe I teased your answer, but would love, what is your greatest memory as a student athlete at Rice?
That I can share publicly?
Certainly.
Let's start with that. Yes, you did tease the answer. It was October 16th of 1994. I was a redshirt sophomore and the starting center on the football team. And we were going against number 12, University of Texas Longhorns, who we had not beaten in 28 years. And leading up to the event, we were supposed to play on a Saturday. And as you mentioned, they moved the game to Sunday night because Major League Baseball was on strike. The NBA season had not started, and there was no such thing as Sunday night NFL football. And so there was nothing that anybody could watch. And so ESPN asked if we would go to Sunday. And of course, everyone said yes. And so if you wanted to watch a live televised sporting event, the only thing you could watch was Rice versus Texas. Now, everyone thought it was going to be a massacre, as it had been the previous 28 years. And in fact, ESPN, leading up to that, kind of teasing the game, repeated, they kept showing JFK's speech that was at Rice Stadium when he was talking about man going to the moon. And it was, some may say, why go to the moon? Why should that be our goal? Why climb the highest mountain? Why 35 years ago fly across the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? And it's because it's hard. It's not easy, and that's why we do it. And so that was kind of the teaser leading up to the game. We ultimately won 19-17, an unbelievably close game. I would tell you that there was a bit of divine intervention involved throughout that game and leading up to the game. They had two wide receivers that went in the NFL, and both had been suspended prior to the game for being knuckleheads. I think they called it violating team rules. So that helped. The starting quarterback was banged up. Their first round draft pick cornerback got hurt in the first series of the game. And I promise you, every time we had the ball on offense, it stopped raining. And every time they had the ball, there was a torrential downpour. I think we recovered 2 onside kicks. We executed an unbelievable fake punt. I mean, everything went our way, and we still won by 2 points. Had we played them 9 more times in the next 9 weeks, we probably would have lost. We definitely would have lost all 9. But on that night, we were successful. And so there's no question that was the best moment that at least athletically that I had at Rice. It sure beat the 77-7 drubbing at the hands of Ohio State.
We'll hold from talking about that one.
Yeah, we won't talk about that one. But no, it was.
Jeremy, I would say, as a fan in the stands in that game, your description of the game was unreal, and I remember cheering nonstop. But the weather was unreal. Every time they had the ball, it poured rain. Every time we had the ball, it was dry as can be.
It was unbelievable, and I still have people to this day that'll come up to me, and whether they were at the game or they saw it on TV, they find out I played ball at Rice. They said, "Oh, you didn't happen to be on the team that beat Texas." And this, I'm carrying on too long, but back at NOV, we were acquiring a machine shop in the Houston area from this guy that had really built it up into this incredible business. And I'm touring the shop with him, and he asked me, he says, Thigpen, I recognize that name. He says, "You weren't the Thigpen that played center at Rice when you beat Texas." And I said, "I was." And he stopped the tour, grabbed me, hugged me, and started crying. And he says, "I was in the stands with my dad and my brother. We'd never seen it. And it was so emotional for us." It was a great experience.
That's wonderful. Well, people celebrate it frequently around here. And last year, we had the 25th anniversary of the game and held a celebration at Rice Stadium where we watched the game on the big screen. And it was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Jen, going over to you, maybe I tease yours as well, but talk about your greatest memory as a student athlete at Rice.
Well, I'd start by saying I'm pretty sure my husband's greatest memory was Jeremy's greatest memory, which was Rice beat Texas. I wasn't yet there, but I know that was amazing. And I had the opportunity to work with Shea Morenz, who was the quarterback then. So that was also one of my favorite things to bring up repeatedly to poor Shea Morenz, who was the quarterback for Texas, that we had beaten them. For me, my greatest memory was on Autry Court. We were playing basketball against Louisiana Tech, and they were probably ranked number 3 or 4 in the country. I think at that point was when they had Karl Malone, who played for the Utah Jazz in the NBA, his daughter, who was probably 6'4", 230. I mean, just a very large woman and very good, just like him. And we ended up beating the Louisiana Tech team. And we didn't have that many fans in the stands. So I'm very proud to see better attended women's games these days. But our limited fans that were there rushed the court. And I had not seen that at a women's game before. And so we all had the chance to celebrate on the floor and have a great time. So that was definitely, I think, my favorite memory. But it's a favorite memory of a gazillion memories. So I could stay here all day and tell you a ton of different stories, but that one definitely stands out.
Well, looking over your schedule from that year, you guys had a lot of big wins. And I don't know the circumstances, but I have to believe you got snubbed from qualifying for the NCAA tournament that year. So
that's okay. We'll keep making up for it in these later years.
The team has done that for you the last couple of years, which has been great. Well, you've obviously learned a lot of lessons as student athletes at Rice that really help you in your career today. So Kevin, I'll turn to you. If you could pick 1 or 2 of the most important lessons you learned at Rice that benefit you in your career today, what would those be?
Yeah, look, there's so many parallels between kind of what you learn in sports and how you could translate that to business. It's endless number of lessons. But if I had to boil it down to one thing, I'd say be able to make kind of quick, analytic, quality decisions would be the thing that I would boil it down to. I mean, whether it's in any sport you play, but in basketball, you read the defense, you have to make a quick decision. You're in a timeout, you have to have a debate with the team and your coach about what you're going to do next. Take in all the facts, make a quick quality decision that's executable and go try and make it happen. In business, I think that translates in an unreal way. I mean, I think that making high quality decisions, kind of boiling through the stuff that doesn't matter, figuring out the things that do matter, make quality decisions on a fast basis that are executable, that you can adjust off of is critical. I think slow decision making in business is one of the things that sucks the oxygen out of a company. And so that's the one thing I've tried to take anywhere I've been is say, how do we take the data and make quick decisions that are executable that we can adjust off of?
Well, that's particularly important right now. And, obviously you're having to adjust a lot.
Nonstop, but you still try and make high quality decisions that based on the data you learn today, and it'll change in an hour, but you still make good decisions and adjust off of it.
Yeah, that's right. Glenn, what about you? You're kind of looking back on your career now. What are some of the best lessons?
Yeah, so the first one's a little personal, but we've all felt it as Rice student athletes, which is we just have an enormous amount of capacity. And there's not much that comes along later in your career that candidly is going to be more challenging or more difficult than being a student athlete at Rice. It just is the way it is. Business school, a tough business environment. What we've all been through with being a student athlete at Rice prepares you for just about anything. The second thought is a little bit more about teams. And I think we always talk about the fact that teams can accomplish so much together and teams can always outperform the individual parts. I think it's also helpful to recognize that teams can underperform the individual parts. And a lot of it has to do with those 2 or 3 people on that team that actually decide that we're going to play as a team, we're going to work as a team, we're going to get more out of this than just a collection of people. And so teams can underperform and teams can outperform, but a lot of it has to do with, I'm just going to call it the captains of those teams. I think third is, and this is a little bit of Kevin's point, is just execution really matters more than anybody can possibly believe. The first class in business school that I took was on strategy. And then quietly there was a class on operations and execution somewhere down the road. I'm just telling you, execution will outdo strategy any day of the week. If a good strategy meets a bad execution, it fails. And if a mediocre strategy meets great execution, you can win all day. You can win all day. And then I think finally, I think this is just something we've all experienced is how you behave when times aren't great, when you lost a few games that you thought you should have won, or you had a really tough academic moment in the middle of the season, or you're hurt, or all of that builds character in a way you just can't believe. And character in sports and school is directly translatable into character in life. And how you behave when times are good is one thing, but how you behave when times are tough really will define, I think, a lot of your future business life or whatever your professional life is. So those four things really have always stuck with me from Rice: capacity to work incredibly hard and get a lot done. Second of all, the fact that teams can underperform and outperform, and it's up to the captains. Third is about execution, just outdoes strategy every day of the week. And then finally, character is really how you behave when times aren't good and things are tough, as opposed to when everything's going your way.
Well, Glenn, I think that last one is a particularly good lesson for the student athletes on this call. It's obviously a very difficult time when you can't do one of the main things that you came here to do. And so let that be an encouragement to folks on this call to really persevere through this time. Kevin, we're going to go to you to talk about the Rice Network. So, I had the chance to visit with you in Pittsburgh a couple of years ago and heard you tell me a little bit about your story. And you have some unique experiences tapping the Rice Network. So maybe you can talk about how the Rice Network has helped you maybe initially, and then how has it helped you advance in your career?
Yeah, thanks, Tanner. So look, Rice Network and Rice as a university has been critical to my wife and I, who also went there, as life and trajectory that our life took. So I took multiple jobs before business school. I was a Deloitte consultant. I worked as a college basketball coach at Texas State, and I worked for the Houston Rockets. And all of those had some Rice element to it that helped me get the job, anywhere from Malcolm Gillis, the former president, knowing Les Alexander, the owner of the Rockets, to the Rice basketball coaches being my recommenders, to those that knew me, helped me get the Deloitte job. But the big turning point in my career was directly related to a relationship that I built at Rice. A gentleman named Ralph O'Connor, who I think everybody on the panel knows quite well, passed away in 2019. But Ralph came to me one day at a Rice basketball game and asked me what I was doing. I said I had just left my job that day and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And he said, "Great, come see me. It's a great day for you." And he hired me to be president of one of his small businesses that he had. And he went on to be one of my great friends and great mentors in my life, helped me get into Harvard Business School, and stayed close to my career ever since, and stayed close to my family. He was the first babysitter. Him and Becky were the first babysitter of my oldest daughter as a senior at Rice. And stayed involved in my life up until his passing, and literally changed the trajectory of my business career by his willingness to take an interest. And honestly, that all started. We were on a basketball trip in Tokyo, playing 3 games in Tokyo, and I happened to sit next to Ralph on a bus during a sightseeing trip, and we became friends on that trip. And then the Rice Network has continued. I worked for the last 8 years of my life, 4 of those with the Carlisle company that Glenn was part of, and it's great to have that network ever since. But it's been a critical aspect to me professionally and personally, as well as my wife and my entire family.
Well, to kind of, Glenn seems to be a hub to many Rice alumni. Just a little plug for our next ProfessionOWL C-suite panel next week. We have the CEO of a wine company that is currently owned by Carlisle. So many tentacles in the network, and especially the student athletes on this call. Just want to encourage you, get to know our alumni. I don't mean to speak for all the folks on this call, but they want to help you. We want to help you. And Kevin's career was obviously changed thanks to a Rice benefactor. And so don't lose this opportunity that you have while you're here. The network is powerful. Jen, we'll move over to you. During your introduction, I mentioned your multiple board affiliations. both in other parts of Rice and within the athletics department, including the Women's Athletics Advisory Board. So, maybe you can talk a little bit about why you've chosen to give back in this capacity as board members. And then, particularly, what advice would you give to our aspiring female student athletes or young alumni on this call?
So I think that the gratitude that I have for my Rice experience is exceptionally high. Kevin made the point about the Rice Network. I have absolutely availed myself of the Rice Network. I live a stone's throw from campus. My kids go to the Rice camps. We go to all the sporting events. My husband's arguably the biggest Rice football fan who didn't play football and wasn't related to anybody that played football. And it's just been a huge part of our experience since the day I set foot on campus. So for me, being able to be a part of those boards has been an important way for us to give back. And similarly, my husband is involved in a bunch of different ways on campus. I think my board experience at Rice has also given me a lot too. So I went on the Women's Athletics Advisory Board really early in my career. I think I was only probably a few years out of graduating. And here I am sitting with a whole lot of women who have very impressive careers and resumes and think very differently than me and clearly have a whole lot more experience and wisdom. But they were incredibly inclusive of me. And it is through forums like that that I realized that, I belonged. And in some ways, if I was willing to speak and willing to put myself out there with my ideas, whether they were all good or not, really didn't matter. This was an inclusive group who absolutely took me at face value. And that gave me a lot of confidence in a lot of work environments, in presenting to our board of directors as a public company, on being on the board of a private company. And so I take a lot from that. I gained a lot of confidence from that. So as much as I've given to these Rice boards, I've absolutely gotten just as much back in spades, which has been phenomenal. In terms of advice to folks, especially Rice female student athletes, one, you have such a big advantage. You can go into just about any room and talk about your athletics experience and everybody's going to want to hear about it, because particularly in this country, and I'm Canadian, but even in Canada, it's just, these are nations of sports fans. And there's so much respect for what student athletes do during their college years. And so I've been able to talk to just about anyone about that. And it's absolutely been the greatest icebreaker. But at the end of the day, my advice probably isn't that dissimilar than the advice of a lot of these guys, which is if you work hard, if you treat everybody the way that they want to be treated and really follow the golden rule, if you're inclusive, and if you follow sort of a pattern of being self-aware and trying to continue along a path of lifelong learning that I think Rice gives us all, then ultimately you're going to be successful. You might have some bumps on the road, but you're going to be successful. And then you have this great network around you of former teammates, other athletes at Rice, administrators at Rice, anybody who literally is waiting for you to call or reach out to give you a helping hand. And all of that is just a tremendous leg up in just about every element of life.
Jen, and to your point of alumni willing to help, one of my favorite things to see is you sitting courtside at all of our women's basketball games. So you're looking over where you used to be, and I know you're always willing to help the players, and so we're thankful for that.
I'm just trying to get Bobby Tudor out of his seats at the men's game so I can move a little closer to center court for the men's ones too.
Tanner, if I could add one thing, which is there is sometimes a belief from Rice student athletes that maybe we didn't fit in perfectly well while we were there. And I will tell you, there could be nothing further from the truth, and you don't fully appreciate that until you come back and get engaged in Rice and you recognize that participating in Rice over your lifetime and doing it across the university is just an extraordinary gift to you, but everybody else views it as a gift to the university. And they just want you engaged. They want you engaged because you had a different experience at Rice than just being a student. And so I just would encourage everybody to just write down a note, stick it in your pocket, because you'll go away and do some things. But at some point, there can be no better service than to come back and get involved at Rice across the university in some form or fashion. And they want us involved. They want Rice student athletes involved for the experiences that we've had.
Yeah, Glenn, that's a great point. And as I look at some of our more successful student athletes recently, they're the ones who have really gotten involved on campus. And I think, often what you put in life is what you get out. And so the involvement gives as much to campus as it does to the person themselves. Jeremy, one of the things I mentioned in your bio was your long career at NOV. So I think particularly today, I think the tenure of people coming out of college at their first job it might even be less than a year. Yet you were at NOV for 18 years. So, talk about why you stayed for so long and how you were so successful during your time there.
No one else wanted me. So it was, as long as I could hide out there for 18 years, actually it was more like 24 years. So I started working for National Oil Well before the Varco acquisition when I was 16. So every summer through high school and through Rice, I worked in the service shop at National Oil Well over off of FM 529. And that entailed me weed eating the yard around the equipment, sweeping floors, pressure washing greasy equipment that came in for service, and then being basically a roustabout for all of our service mechanics who actually knew what they were doing. But every summer I did that. And it was great because I could work really early and then get my workouts in and run in the evening. And as I was about to graduate from Rice, I got a call from the guy that ran that service shop. And he says, "Hey, what are you going to do?" And I said, "I think I'm going to accept a job as a gas trader at Enron." That would not have been good. And he says, "Before you make a decision, I'd like you to meet somebody. We just had this new guy join the company. His name's Pete Miller. He's at the VP level, but he says, I really like him." And he says, "And I think he'd like you." So about 2 weeks before graduating from Rice, I went and met this guy, Pete Miller. And we probably spent an hour and a half in his office and instantly hit it off. And he said, "Jeremy, I want you to come work for me." He says, "I will teach you everything there is to know about running a business. I will let you see the world, and I'll do what I can to get you into Harvard Business School." He'd been to HBS as well. And he said, "Before you answer, just so you know, I'm not going to pay you like a gas trader would get paid or an investment banker would get paid." And I said, "Oh, okay, I'll take it." So I think I signed on for $30,000 a year. And he was true to his word. Obviously didn't pay me a dime, but he gave me opportunities throughout my career. And fortunately, within about 2 or 3 years, he was promoted to president, CEO, and chairman. And the timing for me was perfect. Not only did I interview with a guy that became my sponsor, but this was 1997. The oil industry had been terrible for over a decade. So it was me and a bunch of 55, 60-year-old guys. And so, and we had just gone public. So we were on an acquisition spree. I think we ultimately, during my tenure there, acquired over 220 companies and just grew the business exponentially. But Pete kept putting me in new opportunities where I'd learn a new function and I'd learn, a new product line or service that we offered. And it was always in a new country. And so I think my tally now is I think I've been to 61 countries, lived in 4 or 5 now. But it was just, for me, it was always, listen, I had a boss that I respected, who trusted me. He gave me a lot of opportunities at a very young age. I was fortunate enough to make good on those opportunities, so he would give me more. And so I felt like he valued my work-life balance. And so for me, it was just a great fit, and there was never any reason to leave. I then became CFO, which was a bit of a challenge for me. That was not necessarily my background. I was always more operations, but did that for a couple of years. And while I was there, we spun off our distribution business as a separate publicly traded entity. And with that, Pete decided to leave and become the executive chairman of this new company. A couple of months later, Carl Icahn calls him up and asks him to be the chairman of Transocean. Carl had just won a very ugly proxy battle with Transocean and was reshaping the board and the management team. Pete went over to become the chairman and then asked me, he said, "Hey, would you be interested in interviewing for the CEO job?" And I told him no. And he said, "Well, why?" And I said, "Listen, I'm the next CEO at NOV. I've spent my entire career here. I just think it's kind of cool going from sweeping floors to being the CEO of this, the largest manufacturer in the oil field." And he said, "Jeremy," he says, "I get it." And he said, "But Clay just became CEO. He's got another 8 to 10 years. A lot can change between now and then. Plus, this is the largest offshore driller in the industry. These jobs don't come along very often. and I've never steered you wrong. You need to think about this. And so that's why I left. It wasn't easy, but trusted Pete. It was a unique opportunity, and decided to go ahead and make the move.
That's great. I mean, I love hearing about how Pete mentored you and took you under his wing and ultimately helped with you going to Harvard Business School. It's not a story that Kevin told about how Ralph did much of the same for Kevin. And I mean, I think, that's a testament to we're all products of people who've invested in our life. And once again, I'll mention it to the student athletes on this call. Take advantage of the Rice Network. The Rice graduates and people want to help you. And that shouldn't be lost on you. So speaking of giving back, Glenn, you had a long run at Carlisle, a very successful career, and you recently decided to retire and turn your attention to kind of, I think what you've said is giving back. So maybe you can talk a little bit about your decision to step down and move forward in this capacity.
Well, thank you. And Jeremy, you stole some of my comments later, which is, I do think staying in one place for a long time has an enormous amount of benefit to folks. And I was at Carlisle for 25 years, working for really, really good people, getting to do some really great things. But my wife and I have always been deeply engaged, as is everybody on this call, in our communities. And we do fully subscribe to the scripture that to whom much is given, much will be required. And COVID was a bit of a wake-up call for me. And as we worked our way through COVID, what became very, very clear was that in addition to the health crisis that we all continue to deal with, the economic crisis because of the stay-at-home orders and the resultant changes in business were just causing an enormous economic fallout. And there were millions and millions and millions of people, over 48 million people at one point filing unemployment benefits across the country. Remember, we only have 330 million people in this country. So there's just an extraordinary statement of the disruption that happened. And I looked at Suzanne one day and I said, I think, it's time for us to redirect and really start to do something to give back in a much more full-time way. And so the great thing is Carlisle's a fabulous company and succession planning was easy. And on a Saturday, I called my forever mentors, like everyone else seems to have, and told them that I really was feeling called into doing something else that was much more community and public service minded. So yeah, I mean, Suzanne and I have been blessed to be able to do this and feel called into it. There's still a whole nother chapter to be written. I'll be 54 next month. And so I'm hoping to have another 25-year career in this next stage. But it's really exciting. And I have to say, I think this idea of being engaged in your community is something that you'll see Rice people living day in and day out. And it's really fun to watch. I mean, I remember my very first, kind of been there for 3 weeks, and all of a sudden, a world-class shot putter, who's now a world-class physician named Regina Kavanaugh, talked to everybody about getting engaged in Big Brother, Big Sister. And all of a sudden, the idea of giving into your community was deeply instilled in all of us right out of the box. And so I just think this is a chance for me to kind of flip the tables a little bit and do that part of my life full time. I won't completely exit the world of business. It's been too much fun for the last 30 years. But I think this is a chance to really put some effort into something that hopefully can impact a lot of folks.
Well done.
Certainly a timely endeavor. We need the retraining more than ever with kind of how our economy is changing and the current crisis we're in. And both Jen, Kevin, Jeremy, and Glenn, they're all very involved in the community. And Glenn, you just have the opportunity and privilege right now to be able to do that full time. But I'm not a Rice graduate, but that part of Rice graduates that I find so common is one thing that makes me proud, in particular, to be associated with Rice University. So let's switch to professional and personal growth. Obviously, once you become the CEO or join the C-suite, I'm sure none of you would say that your growth is done. I find that, or I hear that when people reach the highest levels, it's hard to be able to invest in yourself. So Jen, maybe you can talk a little bit about how do you find time for professional growth, and then also to take care of yourself personally with a busy job and being a mom of two?
There's probably not a whole lot of time to take care of myself personally. So definitely just trying to help keep the Neal household afloat. And I have a wonderful partner and my husband, JC, who helps with that. But I mean, personal growth, it occurs every day. And there again, if you can be self-aware about your strengths and weaknesses and what's working and not working, and just continue to try to do better for those around you, do better for your family, do better for your friends, then I think you're ultimately on a good path. Although I don't have a whole lot of time for friends. So I'd say I've been a very bad friend, bad ex-teammate for the last many years, but hopefully at some point the tides will turn and we'll be able to spend more time in that realm.
Well, I guess that's unless they're Rice women's basketball fans, they can see you there.
That's right. That's right. Unless they come and sit with me at the Rice women's games, and they are all welcome to come join me there. I mean, I think professionally, I've never felt like I'm close to being the smartest person in any room that I walk into. So for me professionally, getting to listen to Glenn and Jeremy and Kevin say what they say. I mean, I've taken a few notes down here already, getting to interact with different people, whether it be those that I think that have accomplished more or those just that bring completely different perspectives than what I may have. There's so much opportunity for both professional and personal growth every day in every interaction we have and everything that we do. I mean, professionally, let's think about the challenges of this year. Pretty sure I didn't ever think that I'd be helping to lead, 2,600 employees through a pandemic, but that's the situation we find ourselves in. And it's been phenomenal seeing our company's community rally around each other. It's been phenomenal watching our employees that have to go to work every day. I got to stay home for 6 months. We've got employees that go into our plants each and every day and have performed in what will be a really strong year for us. I mean, that's phenomenal. And I recognize that what I'm doing is, a drop in the bucket compared to what each of them are doing and the risks that they're taking for themselves and their families on behalf of us and our shareholders. So I think professionally, it's just continuing again along that road of lifelong learning. So to the extent you can find time to read, I try to read. Frankly, could do better at that as well. So for me, I get a lot more value in my professional growth today from the interactions that I have with the people that I see on a daily basis or the new people I'm introduced to that I have a chance to interact with. And if I can try to take something from the vast majority of those conversations, then I think that's just continuing my growth across a whole bunch of realms that ultimately, both personally and professionally, will put me in good stead going forward.
Wonderful. You mentioned reading. Any book recommendations for the group?
I'm reading a book right now called Apocalypse Never by Mark Schellenberger, which is focused on climate change. So as somebody in the hydrocarbon industry, climate change is a challenge. And so this is an interesting perspective because, and I'm literally 30 pages in, so I can't tout this entire book because I'm not all the way through it. But he's essentially a climatologist at the University of California, Berkeley, that had been on one side and then has moved essentially to the other side through a lot of work and research. So proving out, for example, that energy and hydrocarbons have actually been able to help save the whales, because instead of using whale blubber for different products, we're actually able to use natural gas liquids and other hydrocarbons. So it's just an example of that's a hugely emerging topic for our world, for our country, for the politics in our country, for the politics in our boardrooms, that I think that I have to be educated on, and I have to understand sort of the full rounded picture. So that's the latest book right now. And then I've got a couple of other books on racism in this country that are sort of waiting on the bookshelf to get through as well. And that's what's interesting, right? This year has brought such a big evolution of, are we thinking about things the way that we should be thinking about things? Are we doing what we should be doing? What more can we be doing to, again, make this a more inclusive company, more inclusive country, more inclusive community? And so I'm also trying to get a whole lot more educated on that, because I think that there's a lot more that I can learn.
Thanks for sharing that, Jen. Kevin, same question to you. You've been CEO of companies across multiple industries. So I imagine you have been forced to step into professional growth multiple times, but talk about how you continue to get better.
Yeah, thanks, Tanner. Look, unlike Jeremy and Glenn, I did not stay at the same place for very long, and I have been. I've been fortunate to run businesses in trade show production, window coverings to consumers, television production for live sports entertainment, and now in the cruise and events industry in the middle of a pandemic. And in a large portion of my professional development has been joining new industries, engrossing myself in those industries, respecting what those who came before me know and learned, and then bringing a new idea to them. So that's been a big piece of it. But I would say from a broader perspective, the thing that I've done that's helped me the most in my personal and professional growth is that I joined an organization called Young Presidents Organization. I think that many of the folks on this panel are probably members of as well. YPO, and there's really two tenets of YPO. One is around lifelong learning, how to be a better father, a better husband, better leader. And the other is how to push yourself out of your comfort zone, which is a critical aspect to do things to make yourself continue to grow. So examples of, I once sumo wrestled in front of 2,000 people. I once drove a car with Blackwater folks trying to run me off the road. And pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone is an aspect of making sure that you continue to grow. And then the last piece is, all of us on this panel are very competitive individuals, as well as the student athletes on the phone, and be able to continue to stoke your passion on some type of competition is critical in my perspective outside of business. My passion for the last 14 years has been golf. I find it one of the ways in which you can continue to get better at something as you get older, and have to learn skills of patience as opposed to just playing harder. So those would be the three. I've joined new industries, which has forced me to get out of my comfort zone. I've been an active member of YPO, and I've really pushed myself to try and get better at the game of golf.
Thank you for sharing that.
And handicap, Kevin?
6.5 right now, Jeremy. But
I'm going to get a lot of strokes when we play. I'm already lobbying.
Oh, man. Well, before we get to Q&A, we've heard a lot of advice on this call. Jeremy, I'm going to turn it to you. If you look, let's focus on our current student athletes here. Whether they're just entering at Rice right now or they're about to graduate, what advice would you give to them?
How long do we have? I would start by saying, if you have the luxury, and I stress the word if you have the luxury and you don't need income right away, to be selective in that first opportunity and really try to find a company and a culture and possibly even a mentor, if you're lucky enough to find that person in the interview process, where you feel comfortable. It's a company and organization where you feel like they're professional, they value you as an individual, they're looking out for your best interest, they're going to give you career opportunities. And again, that's going to be hard coming straight out of college. I was unbelievably lucky, blessed to have Pete. But the reality is, and it's a painful reality, and you guys will all experience it once you get into the workforce, you will spend more of your awake hours at the office than you will with your loved ones at home, unless it's COVID-19, of course. And now I'm home way too much. But you need to find something, an opportunity where you can enjoy yourself, because you don't want to be that person on a Sunday night who's going to bed and saying, crap, I got to go to work tomorrow morning. And so that would be the first piece of advice. Once you get the opportunity, be an athlete. And the two main things, I mean, obviously you guys know how to work as a good team member. But for me, the most important things, and I think Glenn said it earlier about execution, and Kevin said it as well, do what you say you're going to do. Be known as being credible. If you commit to deliver an outcome by a certain date and time, deliver that outcome by that date and time. And if you continuously do that and consistently do that, you will get more opportunities. But you got to do that. It's no different than your sport. Deliver the outcome that you commit to deliver. And the other piece of that is I would say, do it in the right way. My first day at Rice, the freshmen arrived early. I think there were 20 of us on scholarship. We go and we get fitted for our equipment, which was a painful experience for me because it's hard to find an 8 3/8 helmet. But we get our equipment, then we go into the team room. And in the Glenn, it's true, 8 3/8. A lot of brain power up there. We go into the team room, and Coach Goldsmith, who was the head coach, gets up in front of us 20 freshmen, I mean, didn't know what to expect. And there's this huge placard on the wall behind Coach Goldsmith as he's getting ready to start his introductory speech. And it reads, "Your last name is now Rice." And he looks at me because I'm on the front row and he says, "Jeremy, do you know what that means?" And I said, "No, sir, I don't." And he says, "Well, from now on, no matter what you do, it's going to reflect on this university and on me as your coach. So if you do something stupid, like get drunk at the marquee and get in a fight and get arrested, the Houston Chronicle is going to write up Jeremy Thigpen Rice football player. Don't tarnish the brand. Do the right thing." So I would say, you know, be selective in finding your opportunity. Hopefully you find a great home where you can be happy, deliver on your commitments, and do it the right way. Remember, your last name is not Smith now or Thigpen. It's Thigpen - Transocean in my case. And when I hire people to work for me, I always tell them that's the opening speech. Your name's not Smith anymore. It's Smith - Thigpen - Transocean. Don't tarnish the brand. So do the right thing the right way, and you'll have a great and prosperous career.
Yeah, that's a great word, Jeremy. And you know, we talk a lot about around this organization, credibility, doing what you say you're going to do, and that just earns so much trust. And trust is ultimately, I think, that if any of you've written The Speed of Trust, it's a lot about what that book talks about. Glenn, we'll finish with you before we move into Q&A. And you've already shared a lot of advice for us, so let me just slightly adjust the question. Think about your 22-year-old self graduating from college. What would you say to yourself?
I would say first, don't be in such a hurry. I think the reality is 22-year-olds today are going to live to be 100, and you don't need to be in such a hurry. I do think, second of all, remember that you have to bring your A game every day. And it's just stunning how, coaches say this stuff when you're in practice or in a game, and you kind of roll your eyes, and then you get in life and you recognize that you got to bring your A game. Because guess what? I know Kevin Rabbit's bringing his A game. And so, that's just what's going to happen day in and day out, is you better bring your A game. I think third, and I will tell you, Jeremy just hit it on the nail on the head, which is you're going to find yourself like you have the wind at your back when you are working in an organization with people and for people. And remember, you work for people. I mean, you go to work someplace, that organization isn't working for you. You're working for that organization. And they're paying your paycheck and they expect you to deliver. But at the end of the day, if you like the people you work with and really find the organization to be inspiring, you're gonna really love spending time there. And so, again, if you bring your A game and the organization is valuing your A game, you're gonna really find the wind at your back. And then finally, I would just say, and I will say this with great humility, I think one of the greatest pieces of career advice I can give anybody is when you find your lifetime partner, stay with them. Because boy, trying to manage disruptive personal life and career at the same time is hard. And I've just been blessed to have a wife for 26 years who's just spectacular. But I will tell you, a lot of people won't say that, and I'll say that. I'll, do everything you can to do that one time, and to get married one time and have a lifetime together, because it's not only fabulous for your soul, but it's spectacular for your professional career as well.
I love hearing that, Glenn. And that's actually a good segue into one of the questions that we had submitted. And I think, finding out how to balance your personal life and your professional life is really important to how you interact with your family. So, you answered investing in your spouse is obviously very important. Maybe some of you others could share, how do you manage your personal life and your work life when you're so busy, but still want to invest in a successful family life?
I think if you can find people to work with that respect that, then it makes everything a whole lot easier. So the company that I work with, I was lucky to walk into a situation where from the very beginning, it was work-life balance is incredibly important. Your family is incredibly important. And I think it's important for leaders to walk the walk on that one and to really demonstrate it. So it doesn't mean that if I leave at 4:30 to go to a baseball game, that I might not be firing back up the computer later in the night. That generally happens a fair bit, but I think that I would be so incredibly unhappy. My partner in life would be so incredibly unhappy. And my kids would be so incredibly unhappy if that wasn't a decision that I was willing to make. And I'm surrounded by very talented people. And it's okay if things have to wait 2 hours or 3 hours or a day or whatever it may be. But you have to be willing to force that balance into your life, because otherwise it's really easy to go the other way. I think especially as student athletes who are used to being told, run through that wall, and your answer is, yes, sir, no, sir, how fast? It's really hard when it comes to creating a balance in your life, to be able to make that decision that says, I know I've got these 5 things on my to-do list here, but I'm going to step away now because I've got a much more important to-do list over here, and I can get back to that. I would say that for student athletes, that might be one of the harder elements to be able to try to balance. And in my first job as an investment banker, I wasn't very good at it. And it was why I was a really good investment banking analyst, because I would have stayed there all the time, because those were my new coaches telling me what to do and telling me how often to do it. And that became the big focus. And I learned a ton, but I knew that that wasn't sustainable for all the other goals that I had in my life. And I was already blessed at that point to have at the time, almost fiance who was incredibly supportive of both personal and professional lives. So I think you've got to find the right person that also understands how to help you balance that. But there's nothing that I'm doing on the day-to-day for the most part that can't wait for an hour-and-a-half baseball game. And the look on our son's faces when I'm there is more important than anything.
Tanner, just to build, oh, go ahead, Kevin.
No, you go ahead, Jeremy, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, to build on what Jen said, which I thought was outstanding. I think the other piece of it is just prioritizing what's important in your life. So for me, number one is to be a good husband and a good father. In order to do that, I think I have to be a good provider, which means I have to be a good employee. And so finding the right balance in all of that. In my personal job, pre-COVID, I travel a lot. And so probably 40% of the time I'm on the road, international. But when I'm in Houston, I'm here and I'm present. And that means I get up at 4, I get my workout in, I'm in the office before 6, but then I leave the office by 3. And I'm in a position where I can do that. Not everyone can. But that means I'm home when the kids get home from school. I can help them with homework. I can go to all the games. I don't go to any customer dinners or very few customer dinners or anything when I'm in Houston. When I'm in Houston, I'm in Houston. I'm there with the kids. And so I think there's a big piece of that that's just prioritizing what's important in your life and making sure that you're doing that.
So I would agree with everything that Glenn and Jen and Jeremy said. So it starts with a great business partner who's in your personal life. And as I've mentioned, my wife, Emily, we've been married 25 years as an All-American track athlete at Rice, and has been a big part of my career in our success together. But the second thing I would say is, as I've been on different CEO roles, is I don't work for Glenn anymore, so I can say this out loud, is that my job is to work as little as possible and have as much success as possible. And the way you do that is that you hire great people, you put them in the right culture, and you set the right expectations and let people do their jobs. And if you do that and you support them, you can have a very good work-life balance in your life. I've coached every youth sports team that I possibly wanted to coach with my kids, and that's you make time for that, but you trust the people that you put in roles to do things.
Great point.
I love hearing you guys talk. You're all very accomplished executives, yet the key theme I'm hearing is always make time for your family. So this will probably be our last question, just tremendous answers, but this one comes from Joe Savory, who was obviously a tremendous baseball player here for those of you who followed Rice baseball circa 2005. He rightly notes that sports provide immediate feedback loops, but the real world is a little bit longer. So early in your careers, how did you find that the notion of team in business was different than team in your company? And then how did you handle longer feedback loops when you were so used to getting immediate feedback in sports?
I'll just jump in real quick. So feedback loops are it's your own definition. And if you wait to get feedback from some organizational process, then it's too slow. And so I always would have my own job performance review. I'd walk in to see whoever my boss was, and I'd say, all right, how am I doing? Because I think one of the hardest things to recognize in business is, what does good look like when you're kind of making it up along the way, because we haven't seen it yet. In sports, you know what good looks like. You either completely screwed up the pick and roll and didn't come over the top, or you didn't drop the right place in the zone defense and somebody dunked on you, which happened to me a lot. But in business, sometimes we don't know what good looks like. And so you have to absolutely just go at it and ask, what does good look like? And so you manage your own careers. And if you wait for somebody else to manage it, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, and I think to add to that is, you don't need to wait for somebody else to tell you whether or not you did well or you did poorly. We're all athletes. We're all our own worst critics. We all set our own very high expectations, and we know whether or not we've met those expectations. And so I wouldn't wait for a peer or a boss or anybody else to tell you whether or not you're doing well. When I interviewed for this job with the Carl Icahn group, they asked the classic interview question, which was, tell me about a time you failed and what you learned from it. And I looked at him and I said, you're going to hate my answer. I said, I've never failed. And he says, come again? And I said, no. And I said, I consider failure is if you didn't put everything into it. Obviously, I've lost games. Obviously, I haven't met budgets. And I said, but I don't consider them failures. I look back at the process and did I do everything possible? And use a baseball analogy. And I did in that meeting. I said, you got guys in the Hall of Fame that failed 7 out of 10 times. They batted 300 for 20 years and they're in. But did they work with their coach? Did they study the pitcher? Did they guess right? Did they put a good swing on the ball? And if some guy managed to make a great play in center field, is that a failure? I'd say no. If I didn't prepare, then it's a failure. And so don't wait for somebody else to tell you whether or not you're doing well.
Very good. Well, we're at the end of our time, although there's a personal question. I won't say who it's from, and maybe you can see it, Glenn, but someone on the call, maybe one of your classmates, asked, who is the best bartender you ever worked with? Asking for a friend.
Yeah. Gosh. There was a guy named, I can't remember his last name. His first name was Sten, but
Gustafson.
I can't remember his last name, but he could mix drinks with the best.
I just want to know if Jeremy ever went to the Marquee after that earlier comment.
No, never. I never worked as a bouncer there either.
I think the Marquee looks a little different now than it did.
I drove past it the other day. I couldn't believe it. It looked reputable.
It's fancy now.
Oh man, I didn't even want to go in.
I actually visited with another Rice great, one's Jose Cruz. So it's still frequented by Rice alumni and perhaps other Rice affiliated individuals. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you, Glenn, for joining us. This has really been a tremendous conversation. I've personally learned a lot. As Jen said, she's learning from each other, and I'm sure all of you have. And to all the alumni and student athletes on this call, I hope you took a lot of notes. I know that there's a lot of next steps for me in this, but we're really appreciative of all you've done for Rice, both during your time at Rice and since then. And then just to wrap up, next Thursday at 6 o'clock Central Time, we will have our second C-suite panel. So all of you, thank you again for being part of this. Thanks to everyone who joined, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Go Owls.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks guys. Good to see you.
Everybody.
Thank you.